Okay, we're going to start. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much. I am very aware that we have participants here who are joining at pretty ungodly hours. So thank you everyone. But I hope that the topic and what we have to say is going to be worth it. So yeah. So thank you. So today's webinar is on digital literacy in rural Bangladesh. It's a series that BIGD has just launched. We're just starting this series called Digital Inclusion Series, and this is the first webinar we're having in this series. We did a survey, a national rural household survey. It's representative at the divisional level, where we really wanted to understand what is the state of digital literacy in Bangladesh, and also to look at some of the critical services, digital services. So it's both a digital literacy and digital service survey that was done. So we're going to have a series, a couple of webinars based on the analysis from this digital survey. We're starting today with the first idea or concept of digital literacy, and this, as far as we understand in the context of Bangladesh, this is actually one of the first time there is actually empirical attempt to try and measure digital literacy, conceptualize what digital literacy in the context of rural Bangladesh could be. So this is the first webinar, and then we're going to have another webinar which is going to be on the digital divide. We will talk a bit on digital divide today as well, but today's focus is much more on digital literacy, the idea, the concept of digital literacy itself, and how do you go about measuring it, and how did we measure it, and some determinants and some results, application of that digital literacy index that's been created. Now I don't think we're anyway proposing that this is the final word in terms of having a digital literacy index, but this is a first step. And we want to start that conversation because we believe in the context of Bangladesh, it's really important to underpin our ambition for a digital Bangladesh should be underpinned by a robust framework of national framework of understanding what digital competencies and digital literacy is, and then measure it and monitor it so that we can actually reap the benefits of our ambition with respect to digital Bangladesh. Now, obviously, this whole digital literacy idea is very much linked with the Sustainable Development Goal, the 4.2 indicator, which is percentage of youth and adults who have acquired at least a minimum level of proficiency in digital literacy skills. So we really hope to sort of contribute to this whole goal measurement as well. And any framework, today we will talk about this. The whole any framework is sort of also is always. There are elements of adaptation of a particular framework. So there is a global framework that exists with respect to digital literacy. UNESCO does have an attempt towards a digital literacy global framework, but how do we adapt it in the context of rural Bangladesh is the kind of biggest challenge, and this is what we are attempting to do here. So I think Wasel will make the presentation, and I think he uses a word contested. I think it's sort of not really a contested concept. It's evolving and emergent concept, and I think we need to really sort of have a discussion in terms of how to make this concept and this framework adaptable and relevant in the Bangladesh context. So this is not only a technical matter, but it's also a contextualization exercise. So there are different aspects to this contextualization of a global framework. So I think that's the way we should look at it. We have a great lineup of discussants today. Just like to introduce them before I hand over to Dr. Wasel. So we have Dr. Sajjad Zohir. He's the Executive Director of Economic Research Group. Sonia Bashir Kabir, founder, SBK Tech Ventures. We have Greg Chen, Policy Lead of CGAP. Mehnaz Rabbani, who is the lead of research, policy, and governance at BIGD. And finally, we will be joined by Anir Chowdhury, policy advisor to what is now, I think, renamed as Aspire to Innovate. And before he comes, I would, like to extend, I think I'll tell him when he comes, extend our congratulations to A2I for being the 7th-time consecutive winner or awardee of WSIS. I think it's hugely prestigious, and we will congratulate him when he comes. But in his absence, I think we should also feel great that it's not only the A2I, but I think Bangladesh digital ambition is being recognized. So with that, I would now like to invite Dr. Wasel to make his presentation. He's a senior research fellow at BIGD. Wasel, you have about 40 minutes if you could keep within that. Thank you very much. Wasel, you're
right. Sorry. So am I loud enough? Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. Good morning, and it's a very early morning here in Manchester. So let me start with the very important topic of digital literacy in rural Bangladesh. Imran Bhai has already provided a very good introduction of this survey and the study and what we are going to do here. So we worked together in this research team, and my research team members are Saiful, Ifat, and Maria. They are present here, and we'll start with an introduction and background of this survey and also this research, and then we'll talk through the conceptual framework we have developed for this study, and then the empirical findings using the survey data. And we looked towards various determinants of digital access, digital skills, and digital literacy. So we all know that the e-service is a very important issue for every government everywhere in the world, because the e-service reduces the cost both in terms of money and time, and it brings transparency of the service delivery system, and this eventually leads to the public satisfaction and trust in government. So that's why it's very important from the perspective of government. And as we know that the Bangladesh government already has the priority areas, and also there is a campaign of the Digital Bangladesh. So the decentralized, accessible, and efficient public e-service delivery is among the government's top priorities. And already Bangladesh government has achieved commendable successes in many areas. However, there are many demand side and supply side constraints exist to scale up the e-service delivery process and also improving the service delivery system. So by demand side, here we mean the constraints at the consumer or the public end. So here comes their access and the skill in particular. And of course, the supply side issues, the constraints involve the government and the service providers ends, the constraints at the government and the service providers ends. There is no survey in Bangladesh before this one to assess in particular the demand side constraints and the attributes. Okay, so as I said, here the two particular issues we are going to deal. One is the household level skills, digital skills, and digital access. So And because of this lack of data, evidence, and systematic study, there are a lot of confusion in the policy sphere. And these actually hinder formulating an effective and informed policy making on digitization. So acknowledging this gap in the research and data, BIGD conducted a nationally representative digital literacy and access to public service, and it's a household survey. Now, of course, as we know that there is a considerable amount of the digital divide between the urban and rural areas, and it would not be wise to consider both the urban and rural areas in the same scale. So our focus, in particular in this study, was the rural Bangladesh. Okay, and also not at the individual level. Rather, we focus on the household level, because so there are two components of the BIGD survey. One was the digital literacy level, and also the public service delivery system. So we think that at this stage, for a start, we should focus on at the household level literacy skills. So so that's the objectives of these studies, as Imran Bhai already mentioned. One is to explore what is the current state of the digital literacy at rural household level, and also to construct the first ever digital literacy index for the rural Bangladesh and at the household level. So I re-emphasize that these 2 points. This is for the rural Bangladesh and at the household level. So in particular, we investigate a lot of issues. So in particular, the important research questions which this study addresses are: what is the state of digital literacy in rural setting with limited exposure? Here limited exposure means, so the in terms of access and also skills, which is substantially different from the semi-urban and urban areas. Is there any structural disparity, like geographical, gender, income, and what is the bearing of these inequalities on the digital literacy state? And what are the key determinants of digital literacy and on its important dimensions? Again, those are the access and skills. So our survey, as I mentioned, it is a nationally representative sample, excluding the 4 hill tracts areas. And our survey includes 6,500 rural households, and the survey period was September and November 2019. So there are some distinguishing features in our survey design. One is, although it is a face-to-face interview, but we conducted it in a mini FGD style within the household. Why? Because we want to identify the most digitally able person. In short, we'll use the MDAP throughout this presentation, which basically means the person who has the most the highest level of exposure in terms of the using of digital devices and skills within that household. So we asked everybody in the presence of all household members that who is the best person or the best digitally able person within that household. And then we asked that particular section on the digital literacy to that person. So he or she answered that questions. So, and also the most digitally able person not necessarily be the household head. So what we have found that 49% of the MDAP are also the household head. That's mean almost half of the MDAP are not the household head. Okay. So so to be precise, the household level digital literacy in this study corresponds to the highest level of individual digital literacy available to that household. But importantly, this cannot be generalized at individual level. And we also used all the statistical methods, I mean the pilot testing and all through methods to make it a robust one. We used the digitization and we used the service CTO to enable the interviews, and each interview take 2 hours on average. So it was a big survey, you can say, I mean, in terms of the time. So we had some innovation in our survey instruments. We had all the usual type of like the socio-demographic questions and other sort of like the face-to-face questions and that sort of thing. But we also had 2 tasks, practical task, you can say, hands-on thing. So one was on the digital activity test. We asked, we showed a government website, which is the passport website, and we tried to investigate whether they can browse and find important information from that particular website. We also did a visual activity test. We showed them 5 icons with hotline numbers, and then also we checked that whether they can identify those things. We record the completion of the task, but importantly, again, we do not investigate the proficiency level. Okay, so but that is basically whether they can perform it or not, and we do not distinguish among the participants like how much time they have taken to finish the task. Okay, so let's move towards the conceptual framework we have developed in this study. So, digital literacy, of course, it is an unsettled concept. It's an evolving concept. It is already established that it is a multi-dimensional concept. So there are many dimensions here. It is unsettled, and yes, to me, it is a contested one. From which perspective? Because there are the digital literacy framework in the literature. It has been developed and proposed to accommodate different contexts, to address the various type of research and policy questions. And each dimension, each framework considers various types of dimensions, and also the data availability also lead to a diverse and inconsistent sets of indicators. So that's why I say it is a contested one, because there is no consensus, like so what actually define the indicators of the digital literacy, and context to context it varies. So there are many. So in particular, there is a European Union Digital Competence Framework for Citizens, which is in short known as DIGCOM, and also there are many academic contributions in this area of research. But some salient features of the existing literatures are they are measured at individual level. Okay, and remember, in our study, our focus at the household level. Secondly, those are conceptualized in a developed country context. Okay, here we are trying to develop it for Bangladesh, and also in a rural setting, not for the whole Bangladesh. And thirdly, since it is a developed country context, and in many cases, those are in an educational setting when they develop those the digital literacy framework. So those involve a lot higher and tertiary level indicators, which are not at all applicable in a rural Bangladesh setting. Okay, so drawing from the existing literature and contextualizing that for our purpose, we developed this, or we proposed this conceptual framework. So we can see that the whole digital literacy, we divide it into 2 dimensions, big dimension. One is the access, and another one is the skills. And under each of these dimensions, we have a number of domains. So for digital access, we have 3 domains. one is phone, mobile phone, another one is computer, and the other domain is the internet. So digital access has three domains: phone, computer, and internet. On the other hand, digital skills has three components or three domains. One is the communication, information, and the last one is the problem solving. As I said, like we left out a number of domains, for example, the data security and that sort of thing. We think that those are a bit tertiary level of things, and at this stage, we shouldn't consider those within this framework. But of course, we can include those higher or tertiary level of domains and indicators later in this framework. Before going to the other parts, so I want to show that what are the key indicators under each of these domains. And then I will go back like how we actually try to measure the digital literacy and digital access and digital skills using this framework. So for mobile phone, two indicators we have used. One is the mobile phone use. So basically, this is whether a household use a mobile phone or not. So all these, the first thing is we need to understand all these key indicators are dummy variables. So basically, it's a 0-1 thing, whether you do it or you have it or you don't have it. So the first one is mobile phone use. The second one is whether you have access to smartphone. So here, access to smartphone, basically ownership of the smartphone and access to other smartphone. It could be a relative smartphone as well. So that is the access to smartphone. Under computer, the two key indicators are the computer operating skills. So this is measured by the ownership of the computer or the using experience of computer in others' computers. So again, it is a sort of like access, not only the ownership. Okay, but ownership is a component of it. And another component is access to the village computer shop. So basically, whether there is a computer shop in the village or not. So that is another key indicator. For internet, whether they are aware of the internet, that is one key indicator. And then internet connectivity. So internet connectivity or in terms of the mobile and the broadband connectivity. And the third one is the user's experience. So basically, so here the dummy variable is whether you use internet at least once a week. Okay, so that's the three the indicators for the internet. When we are talking about the skills under the communication skills, so these are the things: whether they are able to read or write the mobile SMS, whether they can check, send emails, whether they make video calls using apps, whether they participate in social medias, and whether they can comment on social media. Under information skills, the four key indicators are searching internet for information, obtained public service information through digital medium, and as we mentioned earlier, the two tests, one is the visual literacy activity test and another one is the digital activity test. For problem solving, we have 5 key indicators: whether they pay bill through mobile, so that's whether they have that experience or not, whether they use computer for some productive activity, whether they use internet for some functional activities, whether they have an experience of online shopping, and whether they have an experience of online earning. So these are the key indicators. Then using this key indicator, it is a bottom-up approach. Okay, so we use an equal weight aggregation scheme. Based on these key indicators, we construct a raw score, and based on this raw score, if the score within that particular domain is 0, then we define that particular household has no access or no skill on that particular domain. Okay, so for example, for phone domain, the score is 0, that basically means that both these two variables, they have no access. So but basically 0. So that in that case, we will call that particular household have no access for phone. Now the score, if it is 1, we say that the household had basic level traits. If it is above 1, then it is above basic level traits. So that is the domain level. Now we aggregate this domain level classification to define the dimension level classification. How we do that? We now remember in domain level we have 3 classifications among the households. Now at the dimension level we have 4 levels. One is none, low, basic, and above basic. None is if you have none in all 3 domains. So again, for example, if you have no access in phone, no access in computer, and no access in internet, then you will say the overall digital access is none. Okay, low, if none is in at least one domain but not for all domain, then we call that household as a low. We classify that household having a low access or low skills. Basic, at least basic in all domains. Okay, so household who doesn't have any none in the domain level. Above basic is you have to have above basic in all domains. So that is the thing. Again, once we get the digital access and digital skills scores, then we again aggregate that, and then we get the composite digital literacy index, and we classify the household below average and above average. The below average here, the average is defined in terms of the median value. Okay, so let's move forward then. So what we have found from the survey data. So here first we look at the frequency distribution of the key indicators. We can see in the mobile domain, 96% households use mobile phones, but 41% have smartphone access. Within the computer domain, we see that only 9% households possess computer operating skills. The computer ownership is even lower, which is only 2.4%. 50% households have access to village computer shops. Internet, 46% households are aware of internet. 37% have internet connectivity, either broadband or mobile data or both. And 33% use internet at least once a week. Okay, so here the red means no, the greens means yes. So again, the red means bad, greens means good. Now here is a digression because in terms till now and also later we only discuss at the household level, but we also had a household roster, and from that household roster we got some individual level data. So we had over 28,000 individuals among those 6,500 households. What we have found that almost half of the entire rural population do not use phone. Now, don't take me wrong here, because when I'm talking about the entire rural population, it means like, you know, so all age group. Okay, so when we look at the age group between 16 to 45, and then the sample size becomes almost 11,000. The phone users rate is almost 80%. Okay, very low rate of internet users. We can see from here 16%, and the computer users is again very low, which is 4%. But what is significant here is we can see a visible gender inequality against female in all cases. I mean, in phone, computer, and internet users. And when we do the age group analysis, the same fact actually reflects in age group analysis. So this is basically at the individual level data. Right. Now, going back to our household level analysis. So this slide shows the household classification based on the digital access. So this is the overall, this is the dimension level digital access. So what we can see here that 2% households have no access. Okay, 72% households have low access. So the majority comes at the low access group, from the low access group. 22% households have basic level access, whereas 4% households have above basic level access. So now we want to unpack this dimension level thing to the domain level. So here we can see that for mobile, and not surprisingly, 96% of households has basic or above basic access. For computer, half of the households have no access and only 5% have above basic access. For internet, 54% households have no access, while 37% have above basic access. So basically, in the previous slide where we looked at the dimension level digital access, the low access and no access, these things are derived from the computer and internet domain. Okay. Next, we investigate whether there is any digital regional heterogeneity in digital access, and we found statistically significant regional heterogeneity. Okay, Chittagong, Dhaka, and Khulna divisions have better digital skills. Okay, whereas Mymensingh, Rangpur, and Sylhet divisions have relatively lower level of digital access. So here you can see the red basically means here the no access. The orange bit basically says low access. Everywhere the low access, this is basically the reflection of what we have found at the dimension level analysis. So the low level is dominating the household classification here, and the dark green is basically above basic access. So we can see the Chittagong division is Chittagong, Dhaka, Khulna. They are the front runners here. Okay. Next, the income disparity and digital access. We found a strong, monotonic, and statistically significant impact of income on digital access. Okay. The share of households with basic and above basic gradually increases as income level of household increases. You can see here. Okay. Oops. You can see from here that there is a gradual increase as the gradual increase in the level of excess as the income rises. But even in the highest income bracket, that is when the monthly income is more than 30,000 taka, almost half of the household have below basic digital level, digital access. Okay. Now, the digital skills. So here, the analysis of the key indicators shows that the communication skills, for the communication skills, 68% can read or write mobile SMS, 10% can only check or send emails, 15% can make video calls, 41% participate in the social media, and 28% can make comments on the social media. When we look at the information skills, 27% can search internet, 59% obtain service-related information via digital medium, 46% pass at least one of the visual literacy tests out of those 5, and 13% pass at least one digital activity test out of the 3 we have said. But when we look at the problem-solving skills, only 20% use internet for functional activities, 6% use computer for productive activity, 3% pay bills via mobile, 3% have online shopping experience, and less than 1% earn through online activities. So the problem-solving skills are operating at very low level in rural Bangladesh. So
Wasel,
in terms of,
Wasel,
yes,
you have, try and please wrap up within 10 minutes.
sure. In terms of digital skills, 61% households are categorized as low skills, 16% households have no skills, 15% households have basic skills, and 8% households have above basic skills. Domain level, basically, I want to mention again, the 80% household have no problem solving skills here, okay? And we see the similar sort of trend for the information and communication domains, and approximately 1/4 of the households categorized as low skills. Regional heterogeneity, it basically reflects the same sort of evidence we found, that is the Chittagong, Dhaka, and Khulna are front runners. Income disparity, again, a strong statistically significant association between income and digital skills level has found. Right, this is a very important slide. Here, basically, we unpack the relationship between the digital access and digital skills, empirically, what we have found. Okay, so low level of digital skill is the key indicator of digital divide. Okay, and that may lead to none or very low level of digital skills and further escalate the digital divide. Okay. And an exploratory analysis demonstrates that highly significant evidence of positive association between digital access and digital skills status of households. What we have found here, that ensuring at least basic access to all domain, that is phone, computer, and internet for the rural people, is a prerequisite to achieve an acceptable standard of digital skills. Okay, so next we talk about through the digital literacy. So here, basically, in this slide, we can again find the significant regional variation, both in terms of the median and the interquartile range. Here you can see the Chittagong's median DLI score is considerably higher than the other any other districts. The median DLI score increases as the household income grows. So again, there is a strong income effect on the digital literacy. Okay, overall digital literacy. Now, the determinants analysis. Here we use a multivariate logistic regression framework. For that, we conceptualize the digital access as a function of household level variables, household head characteristics, and their geographical location. Whereas for digital skills, we hypothesize this as a household level variables, household heads literacy, and the most digitally able person's characteristics, okay, and geographical location, of course. For digital literacy, we conceptualize it is a function of both household head characteristics and most digitally able person's characteristics, because digital literacy is a function, is an aggregation of access and skills. Okay. What we have found here for digital access, we found that income has a strong significant effect. Household size has a positive significant impact, meaning that as the household size grows, the access is better. Gender doesn't have any significant impact in terms of the household head gender. The age is insignificant. Literacy, education, both have a positive impact on access as expected, but employment has negative impact, which is a bit counterintuitive, I must say. But we have some explanation on that. We'll come back to that later. And for digital skills, we get again the significant income effect. Household size here becomes insignificant, so household head size has no impact on the digital skill, but digital access is a significant factor for digital and positive influence on the digital skills. Literacy of the household head is a positive impact on the household level digital skills. The education and literacy of the most digitally able persons has positive significant impact, but we can see here that the male, if the most digitally able person is male, then it has a positive impact. So basically, so we can see here if the most digitally able person is a female, the digital skill level is low in that household. Employment again has a negative impact here. So similar thing is reflected on the DLI thing. So and finally, for all cases, we found a significant impact of the regional heterogeneity. Here, the base is the Rangpur, which is the poorest region. So with respect to that, every region has a significant positive impact. Okay, I mean not every, most of them. So so that is the thing. So I just want to say one thing about the employment, because when we define here the employment thing, so the dummy variable here is defined whether he is employed or unemployed. So the student group actually goes to the unemployment category. So it makes sense that whenever in many cases we found the most digitally able person is basically is a student. Okay, so probably that's why we get a negative coefficient on negative impact of the employment on the digital skills. So summary, for both digital access and skills, we found 3/4 of rural households are in and majority of them are classified as low. 4% household do not use mobile phone, and half of the households do not have access to computer. which is 49%, and for the internet, the no access is 54%. When we are talking in terms of skills, households are significantly lagging behind in problem solving. More than 1/4 households are classified to have no skills for both communication and information skills, whereas it is almost 80% when you are talking about the problem solving domain. Digital access and digital skills are strongly and positively associated. We found significant geographical heterogeneity. Chittagong, Dhaka, and Khulna are frontrunners. Mymensingh, Rangpur, and Sylhet are stragglers. Strong and significant income effect on having a better digital access, skills, and literacy is found. Digital access has significant positive impact on digital skills level of the household. The gender of household had no significant impact on digital access, but female-headed households and household with male most digitally able person are more likely to have better digital literacy. The literacy and education of household head and most digitally able person demonstrates significant and strong positive impact on digital access, skills, and literacy. The age of the most digitally able person shows the negative impact on both digital skills and digital literacy. And as I said, the counterintuitive finding is the unemployed most digitally able person has increased chance of achieving better digital skills and digital literacy. Right. So what are the policy questions coming out from this analysis? The first thing is this study provides robust evidence of existing digital divide and demand side obstacles, both in terms of low level of access and skills in the rural areas. Now, in view of this COVID-19 pandemic, what we have seen that digital access and digital skills both become very relevant and urgent issues. And also the recent experience and struggle to target or identify the beneficiaries and to deliver safety net support to them is a testimony of this. So we need to address these issues. So some important policy questions to ponder for us today. How can we develop a comprehensive national digital competency framework, both at individual level and household level? Second, how to ensure better digital access for rural area, particularly for computer and internet domain, to tackle the widespread problem of digital divide. And also, we should not forget about those 5% household who still do not use mobile phone at all. What interventions can be taken to increase the digital skills level, particularly for problem-solving skills, as the problem-solving skills is the skill which has the potential of employment generation in rural areas? And how the structural inequalities, which we have found from our analysis, such as regional heterogeneity, income, gender, and education, can be addressed while we are devising the policy framework. So, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Wasel. So I think we move now to the discussion. I'd like to start off with Greg Chen, primarily because I think it's a really ungodly hour for him and I want him to go back to bed. So Greg, Greg, what I would really like you to focus on is, how does what we are, the framework that we are trying to develop or the index that we are trying to develop, from a global perspective, even if you could comment on that. But I would really like you to also talk about, because you've been very active in the whole digital service domain. So what does, how does what we are finding, what is the implication of this in terms of service and deepening service and making service more meaningful for, poorer segments particularly? Greg, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll try and answer in two ways. Can you hear me, Imran?
Yes,
yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll try and answer first, maybe a response just on the framework and the index, and then some of the questions on the policy front. So first, congratulations to the team and Dr. Wasel for what I think is a clear frame. What I like about the framework is that it's, when it's explained, it's easy to understand. And then it also allows, and it's sort of coherent. It also allows for some tiering. It's not a binary. You're literate, you're not. So there's some tiering, and so I think that adds some nuance to the analysis that was shared. So I really like that. I have just a couple quick questions on or just suggestions on the framework in terms of thinking it through. One is that when I think about computers and phones, I think about devices. When I think about the internet, that's a little bit the medium. So when I think about sort of on the questions as parts of the framework, I think there's we perhaps need to think some of that through just a little bit more. The other question is on access. Part of it is about a demand. It's largely a demand side question, as Dr. Wasel has suggested. I think there's also the broader questions on access, which is really a supply side question or even a policy question. How cheap is data? How cheap are phones? These are questions that affect access. It's not simply a demand question. And those are national policy questions. How accessible do we want to make some of these things? And so and again, I'm not suggesting changing the framework, but that probably brings me to some of my observations a bit on the policy implications. I think it's really important that we have this data and we can understand these layers, because I think it will affect what kind of services can be extended digitally. And I think it's very important to have this kind of nuance. When I come back to some of the policy questions on service delivery, it's, just maybe just a final comment on sort of the policy implications. I do think it's important to always think a little bit about demand, as this index is doing. But it's also, and so I think we've got nuance and we've got layers, and there are some people who will be more ready to take up digital services. But I think it's also important we think about how those services are delivered. And so there's quite a bit of work being done on things like human-centered design, how to make services more accessible for people. There's other work being done on what we call UI and UX, the user interface and the user experience. These are things designed at the service delivery side that can make things more accessible for the user. And so it's not simply something to a burden to put on the end user, in other words. It's actually something that can be thought about in the design of services to extend what kind of services people can access. So I would I mean, to me, those are just some of my initial reactions, but I'm really glad to see this research, and I'm glad to be able to hear about it for the first time tonight. And thanks for including me.
Great. Thanks a lot, Greg. And I can promise you, this is not going to be, the end of the engagement with you on this particular topic. Great. And I particularly liked, and this is something perhaps we need to think through, that what are the implications of design features of what we are finding in terms of the digital literacy survey that we're doing, and especially when we are going to be also presenting how, because we also have a digital service survey done as well as a part of this. So I think that's where we can really get a bit more in terms of the design features implications, something to keep in mind as we do the analysis and for the services. Thanks a lot. Now, and Greg, I mean, you feel, would love you to stay on, but feel free to drop off whenever you need to. I'd now like to invite Dr. Sajjad Zohir, Executive Director, ERG, and of course Sajjad Bhai can speak about anything he chooses, and I'm sure he can. But I would like Sajjad Bhai, if possible, to really help us, give us some of your thoughts and inputs in terms of the way we have conceptualized digital literacy. And, I mean, I'm just sort of, kind of very much aware that, if you think about, and I know that Rashida Appa is here, and I will ask her maybe later to sort of come in, because developing a competency framework or how you measure literacy, the framework behind it, I mean, this is a technical and a political exercise. I mean, there are, this is, and we need to think this through very carefully. So I would really love to hear your thoughts in terms of the, how we have conceptualized this whole digital literacy, the idea of digital literacy, and trying to, create a framework around it, and so on and so forth. And of course, around the sort of analytical approach we have taken, and any kind of measurement issues, that you may want to highlight. Dr. Sajjad Zohir.
Thank you, Imran. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I'll hop between English and Bangla.
Sure.
প্রথমত হচ্ছে, it's a large canvas and it's very difficult to address everything in 5 to 10 minutes. So I'll try to be brief and touch upon few points, and later on, if Wasel feels to interact and engage more into more details, I shall be available. Not today. I'll point out on few key hits. One is a purpose, second is a measurement, and third is more the proposal to widen the scope of research on digitization. Because এটা যখন দেখছি, this whole exercise on digital literacy and the discussion today, what Imran was contextualizing the global agenda, and Wasel was talking about the contestable proposal, and what Greg was suggesting, second point that he just mentioned regarding this, it's not just demand access issue, there is a policy issue, supply side coming in. All these actually point out to clarifying the purpose of the exercise. And obviously, if it's like the old days, if the purpose is to identify poor and make the poor non-poor, then you think through the ways we did. And then you also have to look back and think through what went wrong, or what were the good things and what are the bad things, if there are things to draw upon from. And my understanding is the purpose is not very clear, because I see, two alternatives, at least from Imran, contextualizing a global agenda, which I find difficult to follow. But there is this other thing, is trying to understand. I'm not sure, are you trying to identify who are not literate and make them literate? That's kind of a question that I'm posing. I see broadly the concern that relates to, the government supported e-services, and to bring everybody under that net. If that is the purpose, then we can, try to think through the bigger design, and then under that bigger design, how do we address the rural population, the potential clients? It doesn't necessarily have to be individuals, because most services with the government may have to deal with, in some cases it is individuals, in some cases it is the household. In some cases it is the farmers with some additional information, that kind of thing. So it may be worthwhile before engaging into the survey kind of empirics of it, to think through what the purpose of that exercise is. Now, there is this lack of, it may be in somewhere Wasel talks about the demand part. References to demand and supply sides have been made. The rationale of the study lies hidden in those. Scaling up the e-services will require more illiterate people. It may not be appropriate to term those things as demand. That's the general observation I'm saying. Now, once you start up with this kind of purpose, identify the digitally illiterate and make them literate, or try to capture areas where you need to facilitate so that people may be more engaging in digital services. There has been some work done in Bangladesh in terms of identifying the key digital indicators. And this is something for Imran. The first exercise was undertaken under IGC sponsorship, BGRP sponsorship, by I think Saeed of DNet. He was in DNet then, and then subsequently may have moved out. But that was the first exercise on trying to, kind of identify the ICT indicators, and then what kind of data are available from BBS and other sources. This was followed up by BBS's own publication on I think it's e-governance indicators or something like that. I'm trying to get that. Now, I'll share the name later on, but it's a publication from BBS and Bangladesh Computer Council together, which was published in April 2013. So you may like to, at least make those references and come up with more robust things, and not to completely deny the kind of exercises that were done in Bangladesh, especially since IGC was and BGRP was involved. Now, with regards to the purpose, I also find it a bit difficult. I go back to 1990 and think about Hossein Zillur Rahman coming back and then talking about poverty trends. People raise question, are you going to measure poverty? Ravi Kanpur comes up in 94 and talks about measure poverty being the sole indicator. And there is kind of repetition of the kind of exercises we are currently possibly engaging in the name of digital services and providing digital services, which are often tied up with the external loan and aid packages. This is something I would like people to reflect on. I'm not getting into the details of it. And that, if you remember, we had questions regarding, should we target households, should we target individuals, should we target the community? and there are interlinkages about those things. With regards to digital environment, I think it is furthermore true that the broader environment is more important, and the access and use and those kind of things need to be more fine-tuned in terms of operationalizing any idea about digital literacy. I mean, if you want to pick that word, digital literacy, I'm not sure if that's the most appropriate one that we should aim for, because for a country like Bangladesh, where as things stand, there are areas where we need access is more important than, it can be one person in the household taking care of many things. Anyway, I would suggest that the objectives which seem to appear as operationalize the concept of digital literacy, this is a reformulation I'm suggesting because the way it is formulated is not adhered to. The second part of the objective seems to be explore the state of digital literacy. And when I was looking at it, I said, operationalize the concept of poverty and explore the state of poverty in Bangladesh. Didn't make much difference to me. This has happened quite a number of times, and that's why I would urge the researchers in BIGD to think through, especially you are involved in practices, development practices, to think through and tie in, whether be it a separate exercise, I would think it's a separate exercise, tie it in with the lessons that we learn from targeting poor or targeting people for giving credit, or even targeting NGO membership for any kind of service delivery that we did so far. Now, coming back to the second broad theme is on measurement. Wasel confines to rural households, and accessibility and skills, which is literate, cannot be aggregated. That's my broad observation. Something that Greg raised is the device and domain, device and medium. That's one aspect which has to be differentiated. The BBS work differentiated between access and use. They were not so much into skills. And in this work that Wasel has presented, somehow this access and use have often got mixed up within the broader domain of access. And that seems inappropriate because, again, Greg has already mentioned that point in just briefly, that the use part actually is an outcome of a lot of things, including policies. Affordability is an issue. So I have difficulty in accepting that we break down in things where there are overlaps. For example, I may have a smartphone and I don't need another phone to get point 2, which is the example that Wasel has in his slides. And if I have a smartphone, that's good enough. I don't need another phone. If I have both, then I get 2. And if I have one of the 2, then I get 0.1. Doesn't make sense to me. And then putting equal weights without thinking about the hierarchy of the relationships is a bit difficult for me to accept. I would suggest that the indicator part, there is that domain and dimensions that Wasel alluded to, and then aggregations at one level, then aggregations at a higher level. But I think within that broader category that you have as access, their access and skill are the two broad categories. Possibly use has to be taken away from that domain of access. And there may be a few more things that you may like to add in the category under access. Now, I was thinking through that if I carried out the survey, how would I approach it in terms of trying to understand what is going on? And obviously, what was, before I even talk about whether I buy a computer or buy a smartphone, the mega environment, the macro level, what people call as ecosystems, would have to be looked into. So in a particular area, do I have cable connections? maybe assumed to have mobile connections as well. The second is a broad category of no cable but adequate mobile connections. And third is poor or no mobile connections and no cable connections. Those are the three broad kind of environment, physical environment that we may have to live in, because we are talking about rural and kind of not mobility being taken into account here. Within that kind of environment, people do invest in things, be it smartphone, be it on a computer, or even commuting to a kiosk, local computer shop. Those are the things that come in later as an outcome decision variables. And I believe that that's where the use part comes in. And people also then talk about developing skills to avail those things. So initial design somehow have to take into account that macro environment, what I'm referring to as ecosystem. I hesitate to engage in this, the number games that have been developed, because the construct itself to me is yet to be fine-tuned. So I would urge the researchers to spend more time in conceptualizing and making things more consistent and palatable before engaging in the number exercises with multivariate analysis or cross-division comparison, because many of those numbers may not be very meaningfully used. Uh, what Wasel finds as the counterintuitive finding and has an explanation in terms of students and unemployed, I thought that that could have been checked before even making the presentation, because you have the information on students, I believe. But if that is ruled out, and if it stands that the counterintuitive finding is unemployed MDAP has increased chance of achieving better digital skills and digital literacy, but unemployment, they are unemployed MDAP. That seems to be the most fascinating finding to me, in the sense that if that is true, if the student-based explanation is not valid, then obviously it questions the very objective of finding the digitally illiterate people and to talk about programs that will make them digitally literate. Because if the digitally literate people end up being unemployed, then obviously much of the intents are lost. I mean, now again, I would suggest this is going outside. I mean, as I said, it may be worthwhile to engage more intensely with the method part, which is very difficult unless we have all those things in front of us. But I can say that user and access have been mixed up there. This is a broad observation. And once that is developed, maybe the same thing can be redesigned in terms of the number game. But what I would request is to reflect on, I mean, I'm not willing to go along with what Imran said about contextualizing global agenda. This has been happening for too long. Financial inclusion, disinclusion, poor, targeting poor. It's time we think independently and think, how do we make the maximum out of making this country more digitally, digitally, whatever we say. I mean, people are more willing to engage in an environment that facilitates not just e-governance, transparency and all other things that are fallouts of those things, but also in the business sphere. And some reflections of that you will see in the BBS publications, where sector-specific digital improvements, I mean, usability, those are being discussed, and those are the indicators that had been proposed. And when we think about the digital things in Bangladesh, we should also be thinking beyond what the global agenda is. I should stop there. If there are questions later on, we can engage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sajjad. This is exactly, I think, why I really wanted you to be here, because you do raise some very fundamental, I think, perspectives and questions that we need to really think through. Maybe Wasel towards the end can really reflect on primarily the whole points that you have raised about the construct of the concept itself, because I think I think that's going to be really important for us to kind of really make the index, the digital literacy index that we're trying to develop, kind of more robust without making it more complicated. Because I also take the point that Greg was basically raising right at the beginning in terms of it's easy to understand, being coherent and all of that. But there are certain I think conceptual challenges here in terms of mixing different things and being able to aggregate in a robust way. I think we should be able to defend the index as well. So I would basically think that that would be a piece of work that we'd really like to do immediately before we sort of make this final and sort of publish this. And we'll obviously get back to you, Sajjad Bhai, on that. Some of your other broader points around what is the whole purpose, and questioning some of the assumptions between digital literacy and public service delivery. I think from the sort of there's some automatic implicit embedded assumptions we have, and I think those revealing those, unpacking those, and then putting it out there, I think is really, really important, sort of as well. So thank you very much, and this engagement to sort of continue. Now I'd like to ask Mehnaz. I don't know if Anir Bhai has sort of come in at all, but maybe after Mehnaz speaks, hopefully Anir Bhai will be there. But Mehnaz is the lead of research policy governance. This is one of our kind of big kind of cross-cutting research program that is really trying to connect the bridge between what we think is a broken bridge between research and policy, and we are trying to see whether that broken bridge can be strengthened, so that we actually can offer sort of research into better policy making and sort of better governance. What I would really like to ask Mehnaz is, again, you have been quite deeply involved in this sort of survey as well. So from a more kind of research policy governance point of view, if your reflections from this, from what Wasel had to present, but also perhaps instead of me, maybe you can talk a bit about what BIGD itself is planning with respect to sort of digital research in the future. Mehnaz, over to you.
Thank you, Imran Bhai. And thank you, Wasel Bhai, for the presentation. I know it was a bit of a challenge actually to present so much in such a short time. This survey, this is only a little part of the survey that we did actually. So it has a wealth of information which we hope to present and publish in this series in the coming months. So this was a good beginning. So just to give a little bit of background of the motivation for this research. So we actually started with the questions, Greg, you were asking, or even Sajjad sir, you mentioned that we started with this idea of, we want to have a general understanding of how people are experiencing digitization in Bangladesh. We have hundreds of digital public services, essential services that are being digitized. So we started on the supply side actually, and we started to dig into, how people are using it, what is their experience, and why they don't use certain digital services while they use others. And at that point, we realized that we really need a deeper understanding of digital literacy. In rural Bangladesh in particular, to be able to understand it, to measure it, and see, if there are variations. So that's the motivation was on the service side, on the supply side, but we thought that this is the first step. This is this conceptual framework is required for us to move forward with the agenda that we have. So that's how this started, and You're correct. Sajjad sir was mentioning, you know, when we have an index, do we, just like a poverty index, do we draw a line and say some people are not literate, some people are literate, and should we try and make the illiterate literate? I don't think that is the objective. This was done to get a deeper understanding and be able to provide the right kind of evidence and data that is required for service providers and policymakers to make sure that digitization in Bangladesh is a process that is inclusive and effective in scale up. So there are some interesting things that have come up in the findings, which we didn't have time to present in detail. For example, the test that we did, we asked respondents, we showed them the browser of the government passport portal, and we asked them to do some very basic tasks, like download the application form or find the hotline number where they'll be able to call if they have problems. And only 11% of the most digitally literate personnel of these households were actually able to complete the tasks, which means that almost 90% of the rural population are not able to go online, apply for passports for themselves. So this has given rise to a very interesting phenomena, I think, of this assisted access. People actually have to go to someone else. There are intermediaries who help you access services, which is interesting because we often imagine that digitization of services means that you get rid of all the barriers and it's free and easy access to services, but that's not the case in our context. We have intermediaries, both government and private. Of course, the Union Digital Centers of Bangladesh that was created just for this reason, so that rural people have services that are meant to help them access services. But there's also a host of private intermediaries who help rural populations to access these basic services. So this is implications on cost, and that's what we want to go into further in depth later on when we analyze the access to services part of the survey. It also has implications in terms of data privacy. If I'm going to seek someone's help for applying for a passport, for instance, I'm sharing my private identification and sensitive information. So those are issues that will come up in Bangladesh as we move beyond this stage of digitization. So we felt that digital literacy was a fundamental part of this whole digitization story that we're trying to understand. And to be able to achieve the vision of digital Bangladesh that we as a nation we're trying to achieve. So this is only a beginning. This literacy index we say is the version 1, which implicitly we know that it needs more work, but this was required for us to move on with our agenda of making sure that digitization is an equitable and effective process in Bangladesh. And hopefully that will be useful for policymakers and researchers across the country. One thing that I've been thinking about throughout this presentation is that digital literacy, I mean, to be able to make digitization effective, we need a critical mass of people who are digitally literate, whatever level we're talking about. And this is not just about education and training. This is not just about having a phone or having access to internet. It's about a behavior change. It's about a cultural shift, behavior shift. And like any other behavior shift, this will require very carefully designed, planned, targeted campaign or innovative interventions. Sonia, she had to leave early, but in one of our events, she had mentioned that if you're able to use emails, but if you're printing out everything before working on your computer, you're not really making the best use of digitization. So it's a cultural and behavior change that we're trying to, we have to go forward with. So this needs a more carefully planned, targeted campaign, hand in hand, that will go hand in hand with the sort of scaling up of digital services that's happening in Bangladesh. So with that thought, I'd like to end. Thank you, Imran Bhai.
Thank you. Thank you. Is Anir Bhai, has he joined, or he still hasn't? I can't see him.
No, I'm afraid he's not here yet.
Well, I mean, let's see if he does join before we finish. But maybe at this stage, I would like to. I mean, Mehnaz, thanks a lot for that. What I would just like to add, which I was going to say at the end, but I might as well say here, for BIGD, what we are calling social science of digitization is a cross-thematic thrust area of research that we will be working on over the next few years. This survey is obviously a very strong foundation of that. But as Mehnaz said, that what we are really concerned about, or what we're really interested in ultimately, is effective access. And within effective access, we are really talking about equity. We are talking about all the different elements that makes the overall environment. There are different ways of making access effective, and digital literacy is only one part of it. So aside from this big survey, we also have a competitive research grant that BIGD is managing. It's funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's a competitive research grant. It's a global competitive research grant to promote rigorous research on trying to identify the mechanisms through which digital financial service leads to women's economic empowerment. And we will be launching our first call for proposal on that very soon. And we're also developing core capability to do more frontier research in this whole space of the social science of digitization, because we believe that rigorous social science perspective can really help in terms of making our digital solutions far more effective and impactful for the lives of common citizens. So we really believe in that. So watch out this space. We're going to be really engaging with all of you. Sort of much more around this whole area of social science of digitization. At this stage, as we perhaps, let's see if Anir Bhai does join us, but maybe I'll move to Wasel. Wasel, do you have any reflections, any thoughts on some of the comments that have been made? Yeah. Wasel, we can't hear you. Yeah.
Right. So, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Greg and Sajjad Zohir for some insightful comments on that. The first thing is, I fully agree regarding the demand side and supply side issues. But as I said, like, the primary purpose of this this study was to explore the demand side issues. I mean, the skill level or the literacy level. The first thing is, so as I mentioned several times, it is a challenging and contested issue. Like the digital literacy, it has been termed, there has been so many terms has been coined in the literature to say the same thing, so media literacy, information literacy, ICT literacy. And in the frameworks, you will see that they just add some dimensions and sometimes delete some dimensions or adding some few domains extra, and they come up with a new framework. So it is important to contextualize the framework to fit within our purpose. Okay, so that is the number one thing. Secondly, this is not a dichotomy thing, like, the literate or illiterate to identify that sort of thing. It is not the purpose of this, the whole conceptual framework. This is like, to identify or distinguish between the group of households. So since we are not dealing with the individual level, but the thing is, because this framework closely follows, particularly the digital skill thing, closely follows the EU's framework, they use the same sort of thing on the digital skills, but they have like some tertiary level of domains. We don't include that because we think that for the rural Bangladesh, those are not important. So that's the thing. So this is not a dichotomy. So we want to identify between the no, low, basic, and above basic groups. So that's the thing. One issue repeatedly comes about the use and access issues. Now the thing is, sometimes the using some service or using the internet basically indicate whether they have the access to that particular domain, so that is the thing. So there is no confusion actually to me, like so whether the use so whether you use an internet, that is a proxy that whether you have access to effective access, I must say, to that particular domain. Similarly for computer, okay, so for computer we have like two domains, two particular key indicators. One is whether you have a village computer shop, so that gives one indication that whether you have access to the computer things, and another one is whether do you possess that particular skill. So how we capture that? We ask the question whether you own a computer or you can use others' computers even if you don't own it. So these things, and if you go back to the existing literature, so access is a very important component of the literacy, digital literacy. For example, in the Rosa's work, Park's work, Sketty's work, you will find that the access is an important component for the digital literacy framework. So I think that access is an integral part of the digital literacy. It's not all about the skills. Okay. Then
Wasel, sorry, I mean, if you maybe can I take a few other comments from people, or you have anything else you want to clarify?
Just another final point, then I will leave. Another one is the equal weight issues has been raised. So again, in literature, usually in these cases or any indicator analysis, so the equal indicator constructions, equal weight is the best way to go, because you actually don't know what is the exact weight of that particular indicator, and so that's the thing. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. It always reminds me the whole discussion and around the whole Human Development Index construction. And I think one of the comment was that the idea is not to come up with the most perfect index or technically perfect index. It's something that we want to come up with something that's clear to understand, that can galvanize public action. And I think ultimately that's what we also want to do. But I think there are improvements we can definitely make, and we will keep that conversation on. At this stage, there are some questions that are coming, but I see some some people that I would like to invite to sort of among the attendees. I think it will enrich the conversation. I see Rashida Appa is there. I don't know whether Rashida Appa you're still there. I would really like you to perhaps reflect a bit on because you've been very deeply involved in this whole period, and still even literacy in Bangladesh. How do we actually measure literacy and the politics around that, and how the whole policy making apparatus, and I think it's still an unsettled concept from that point of view. So now I really like your reflection as someone who's been deeply involved in the literacy movement in Bangladesh. Any advice you may have.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you. I don't know whether my video is working, but that's enough. Audio is enough for me at this point in time, because I've been listening, and that's always a privilege to listen to BIGD research, because it contains so much information. First to, grasp that information and to start thinking about it. It's always such an enriching experience. Thank you so much for doing it. It's so timely and so much needed at this point of time, because I'm neither an economist. First, everybody should understand, neither an economist nor a researcher on digital literacy, etc. But it is such an important topic, and because of whole issue of distance learning, digital learning for almost 30 million students of Bangladesh. I'm not talking about pre-primary, but from primary to higher level. So keeping that in mind, I have been listening to all the presentations, but just few things have come up. I've been asking myself actually. One is, I suppose you will be doing kind of research or literature review, because there are other studies or other focus on digital literacy areas going on. Maybe looking at those will help enrich this particular survey. And the other thing, yes, what Dr. Zohir has also mentioned, the conceptual clarity regarding digital literacy. What does it actually mean for rural population in Bangladesh? So that is one important thing, because there is a lot to talk about practice and implications. The other point that I would really like to urge upon all of you is to go for, as a next step, how do we go for policy level advocacy on the issues raised? This is one major challenge for all of us. We have been doing all this wonderful research. How do we disseminate it? And I would request BIGD to make kind of an user-friendly version for our, thousands of development workers, those who have been working in the field and trying to negotiate or maybe advocate with the government, local administration, particularly education administration. What are the implications? How do we go for policy advocacy? This is one as a next step. I have questions actually. You have looked at regional heterogeneity, that is true. And Sylhet is the second layer, I suppose. But interestingly, Sylhet is always kind of paradoxical, because you have also talked about socioeconomic or economic, the relationship between economic status of the household. But in Sylhet, the per capita income, the income parity index is here somehow. I don't know, how do you explain it? Sylhet, the lower level, but at the same time, in terms of income parity, it's at the higher level. How do we explain it? And number two, have you looked at the research team, the number of devices available within a household? But that also makes a difference to learners, particularly girls. If there is only one device available and 3 learners at that home, there is always a choice that goes in favor of the boy. Because that's, have you looked at it? Because we have been getting this message that girl learners, all these girls, they are not getting, they have access, but only one device available in the household. Have you looked at that one, that particular dimension? Again, thanks a lot. I'm still trying to grasp the technical side of it, but it's a wonderful thing that will really enrich our, at least campaign's next steps in terms of advocating with the policy planners. Thank you so much. And can you also somehow, who is there from BRAC side? I don't know. The Planning Commission is almost finalizing its 8th 5-year plan document on the social sectors like education, ICT, and health. It was discussed just last week. So we need to advocate with those groups that it should be, because digital literacy doesn't come overnight. So we need to have it inside the 5-year plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rashid, as always, very thoughtful and extremely encouraging. I mean, I think combination of the two is what is really needed. we want people to be thoughtful, but please encourage us, as well. So thank you very much. I also see, I mean, I think, hopefully, I don't know, Anir Bhai, will he manage to join? He's trying to, finish up something, but he knows about this work. Even if he can't join, we will keep our engagement. We have quite deep engagement with Aspire to Innovation. So this is something we'll try and sort of have deeper engagement on. But I would like to hear from I see Mosharraf Bhuiyan sir is basically here. I mean, aside from his kind of many years of extremely senior experience with the government bureaucracy, Mosharraf Bhai has been working with BIGD on another project where we're really trying to look at the readiness, the sort of the readiness of Bangladesh with respect to the ICT readiness. It's a global project in which we're working in the context of Bangladesh as well. So Mosharraf Bhai, any reflections from your side would be, and any advice in terms of what could be the next steps? Mosharraf Bhai, are you there? I saw you there, but we can't hear you. Or has Mosharraf Bhai left? I don't. Mosharraf Bhai, you are on mute. Well, he seems to still be on mute. Okay, well, I see that Anir Bhai will be here in 2 minutes. I think Sajjad Bhai, you wanted to come in. You had a particular point that you wanted to raise.
আমি বলছিলাম ওয়াসেলের জন্য,
right,
যেহেতু you have the data. See, there is a difference between indicator and variable. Indicator যখনই আমরা বলতে যাই, আমরা কোনো একটা কিছু মনিটর করতে নামছি যেন। So indicator করার পারপাস তো থাকতে হবে, if I understand. তোমার এই before you go into the aggregated part, যে কোনো ইন্ডিকেটর হিসেবে ব্যবহার করি হচ্ছে মূলত মনিটরিং এর জন্য। And I see a trend of repeating the same old stuff, যে জন্য আমি খুব করলাম, আমার পার্সোনাল এক্সপিরিয়েন্সগুলো এলাবোরেট করতে গেলাম না, পভার্টিকে শুধু মেনশন করলাম। ইন্ডিকেটরে যদি না যেয়ে তুমি যদি তোমার এক্সপ্লেনেশনস গুলোর দিকে, বিকজ ইউ হ্যাভ দ্য ইনফরমেশন অন দ্য ভ্যারিয়েবলস, এটাকে একটা কাজ হচ্ছে পুরাপুরি রাশেদ আপা যেরকম একটা ইস্যু তুললেন, কেউ হয়তো বলতে পারে যে আচ্ছা এই ধরনের অবস্থা থাকলে হাওয়ার, যেটা আমি দেখতে পাচ্ছি আনিস পারভেজের যে জিনিসটা তুলেছে বিহেভিয়ারাল পার্টটাকে ক্যাপচার করার জন্য, ইউ মে লুক ইনটু দোজ থিংস। ওই ডেটাটাকে ব্যবহার করে অনেক ইন্টারেস্টিং কাজ হতে পারে, যেটা উইল গাইড আস ইন টার্মস অফ পলিসিজ, অন্যান্য ইনসাইটস দিবে। ইন্ডিকেটরে যদি ট্র্যাপের ভিতরে ঢুকতে চাই, আমি মনে করি যে উইল হ্যাভ টু লিভ ইন দিস দুই নৌকায় পা দিয়ে চলার মতো বরাবরই আমাদের জেনারেশনও করে আসছে। গ্লোবাল এজেন্ডা থাকে, তারা মনিটরিং এ মোর ইন্টারেস্টেড, তাদের সাথে এই ডায়ালোকেশন এটা ওটা নানান কিছু জড়িয়ে বসে থাকে। এবং যেটার জন্য আমি রবি কানপুরের কথা বলছিলাম, কেন সে ভেবেছিল 94-এ যে একটা ইন্ডিকেটর উইল টেল এভরিথিং, উই ডোন্ট নিড এনিথিং এলস, এই এক্সট্রিমে চলে গিয়েছিল। And I think it did lot of harm to the development of these countries. আমি খুব এক্সট্রিমলি ফেলে বলছি, এই রিপিট করা যেন না হয়, সেই কারণে আমি বলছি যদি ইন্ডিকেটরের ব্যাপারে যদি প্রফেশনালি এনগেজড হও, what I was suggesting is there is a hierarchical structure, এবং সেখানে ইউজার অ্যাক্সেস মিক্স আপ করা যায় না। মানে ইউজ ইজ অ্যান আউটকাম, মানে কে কি, ইভেন দ্য অ্যাসেট অ্যাকুমুলেশনস অ্যাক্সেস পার্টের একটা লেভেলে ইজ অলসো অ্যান আউটকাম ভ্যারিয়েবল ডিসিশনের once you have the environment. তা আমি বলছি যে কনসেপচুয়াল লেভেলে ইফ ইউ গো ফর দ্যাট কাইন্ড অফ যে কোনো একটা ইন্ডিকেটর যেটা মিনিংফুলি বাংলাদেশের লেভেলে কোন জায়গাতে রিসোর্স, যে জন্য আমি কম্পেয়ার টানছিলাম, অ্যানালজি টানছিলাম হাউসহোল্ড এবং ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল অ্যান্ড কমিউনিটি, এই তিনটার ব্যাপারে কিন্তু অনেক আলোচনা হেলথ সেক্টর, সার্ভিস ডেলিভারি থেকে শুরু করে সব জায়গাতে কিন্তু প্রযোজ্য। And I believe আইটির ক্ষেত্রে প্রযোজ্য। I will ask you to rethink on those issues. Thank you.
থ্যাংক ইউ সাজ্জাদ ভাই। আমরা যেটা বলছিলাম আসলে মানে কিছুটা মানে এইসব জিনিস সিকোয়েন্সিং করা সবসময় একটু মুশকিল। আমাদের এর পরবর্তী যে ইমিডিয়েট 20 তারিখে যে আমাদের যে কাস্টমার প্রেজেন্ট করবো সেখানে আসলে this is precisely what we do. We look at digital divide, but we don't get into indicators. We basically do just look at the variables, raw variables, and then look at the interesting patterns that's emerging from the variables in a sort of fairly open-ended way. মানে অনেকটা ওই grounded theory একটু মানে দরকার মাঝে মাঝে I think getting stuck in terms of either frameworks and theories and then indicators and index এই ধরনের জিনিসগুলো আসলে অনেক ধরনের ট্র্যাপ তৈরি করে and thank you very much for reminding sort of on that. তো হয়তো we should have reversed it. We should have had the first যেটা 20 তারিখে করবো সেটা হয়তো আগে করে তারপরে ইন্ডেক্সটা করলে হয়তো এটা মনে হয় সিকোয়েন্সটা ভালো হতো but anyway, so we will, of course, the survey itself is a very rich survey, and I think from a methods point of view, from a measurement point of view, আমরা যেভাবে হাউসহোল্ডের মানে ডিজিটাল লিটারেসি মানে লিটারেসি বলবো না, ডিজিটাল মানে স্টেট অফ ডিজিটাল নলেজ এগুলো বোঝার চেষ্টা করেছি to this identifying the most digitally kind of capable person তার এবং হাউসহোল্ড roster থেকে অনেক ইনফরমেশন আছে. So then I think the survey itself is very rich, and we should definitely discuss how we can get much more out of this survey beyond even what we will be doing. So I think আমরা BIGD, we really believe in the sort of public use and maximum use of data that we collect. So let's keep that conversation going. I don't know if Mosharraf Bhai has joined or if Anir Bhai is here, but I see Asif. Asif, it'll be great to, I know you joined right now, or I don't know whether you saw the presentation, but
yeah, I just joined korlam.
Okay. All right. But do you have any?
Asif was also in the same workshop with me.
Oh, okay.
On Generation Unlimited.
All right. Okay.
So I can vouch for him.
All right.
He was not bullshitting.
I was underrating, so.
Right. So Anil bhai, আপনার কাছে আসার আগে, Asif, would you have any? I mean, this, we've been really looking at this digital literacy survey. Maybe, do you have any reflections, with respect to, what BRAC is doing? Maybe it would be good, for us to hear, because, even if you have not heard the presentation, I think BRAC area janle, we can see the next steps.
No, I think I'll be very brief. Sorry, I haven't seen the presentation, but would love to see it. But this is becoming, I think, the front and center, the biggest issue right now, as we are kind of morphing into different ways of providing service, which, I mean, COVID has kind of forced us to, right? So in a sense, with the transformation that we are probably looking at in 3, 4, 5 years, that we are now looking at in talking about months, and then the biggest obstacle now is the not just the literacy part, but also the infrastructure bit. I mean, for the literacy part, obviously, I think I mean, in my past work with Anir Bhai and Etua in the past as well, that we always have been proponent of that. If you give people the tools, people figure out a way to make it work for them, right? I mean, Bikash is a great example for that. But obviously, there are different dimensions to that. I mean, when we first, for example, looked at mobile financial services, and we started looking at gender dimensions, and that's something that was very, very striking for us, that we didn't even think about it, that even a lot of people, for a lot of women, having a mobile financial account in their phone and doing the transactions themselves is very difficult. They're basically, they would need a lot of support in basic numeric literacy in terms of how to use the phone as well, right? So that led us to kind of go back to scratch and design communication materials and training materials for them to teach some of those very basic things that we basically take for granted. But similarly, I think as there are different dynamics to that. I mean, if we're looking at service delivery in general, obviously mobile financial service delivery is becoming a very, very big factor going forward. Whether you want to do cash transfers and very quickly, And there has been a very interesting learning in this last 6 months. I mean, when we first announced that we are going to provide 1,500 taka worth of unconditional cash transfer, we were under this assumption that the ultra poor that we are trying to reach are going to be very much people who don't have access to mobile financial accounts, and they're going to have a lot of difficulty in this. So we mostly transferred through manual means in the first lot. Then we realized that it's very time consuming, difficult. It's very risky for people who were going. We had 3 people going at different households to ensure that there's proper transparency and all that. Then we thought that we should ask people that whether, rather than assuming. And then we did surveys, and there are some interesting write-ups around this among our ultra poor participants. So the basic phone access was there for 38%. Then when we asked that, do you trust somebody who has access to phone and who you are comfortable if we send the money to that phone, then the access rate became 87%. So that's when we said that, okay, let's try to do this in a different way. So we got those numbers, and also this remaining people, we ensured that we quickly, in partnership with bKash, we quickly get them on board, do the digital literacy, get their accounts open. And then from next phase, we did 2 or 3 more phases after that. And we did about close to 93% via digital transfer as well. And at that time, the appetite to learn and pick these things up was very, very obvious, that people were like, okay, anyway, the money gets into me, and they were very, very eager to do that. So again, when the needs are very high, the appetite for change and appetite to get this knowledge is very high as well. So that's what we are seeing, not just in MFS, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, all of these areas, the appetite for change or getting these services digitally is very much higher. Now we see the biggest obstacle is the infrastructure. We just recently introduced this telemedicine for all our staff across the country that we, in partnership with a company called Dr. And that's something is also a testing for us in terms of seeing how the sort of adaptability happens across our staff. Once we see that, we can also will be able to encourage all our program participants to see that this kinds of service can come handy as well. So I will stop here, and I may hear from Anir. Thank you, Imran.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Asif. I think, you raised this really, kind of important points in terms of I think never let a crisis go to waste in some ways. I mean, crises are also periods when big changes are also possible. But we need to ensure, as you rightly said, we understand the demand, kind of entry points. I think the new entry points are created from the demand domain, but we have to quickly also work at the sort of supply side as well to ensure that that kind of very narrow window of opportunity of big change is sort of perfectly sort of possible. And I think it's and sort of I think BRAC is doing a lot in that space, and I think there's a lot to learn from that. I would like now, kind of to listen from Anir Bhai. So Anir Bhai, before you basically came in, I was congratulating A2I for winning the WSIS award for the 7th consecutive time. So clearly, congratulations, under your sort of leadership, this has really happened for the 7th consecutive time. But you would love to hear your thoughts in terms of, this work that we have done. I mean, I know you haven't heard, but you've seen the presentation, I'm sure. And again, we're going to be doing more of this kind of webinars from the survey. But any thought in terms of how this survey and what type of analysis could be useful from this rural national survey that we have basically done? Would love to hear that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Imran Bhai. Colleagues, my apologies, sincere apologies that I'm here so late. Although I said I would probably be able to make it by 1. That was the original cutoff point for the workshop that I was facilitating. But শেষ হয় নাই, ওটা এখনো চলছে আর কি। So I had to, যখন Mehnaz sent me the text, আমি বলছিলাম যে it looks rude if I come so late, but she said that might still be okay. So my gratitude for allowing me to be here so late in your discussion. আমি প্রেজেন্টেশনটা দেখেছি, মানে খুব যে একেবারে ডিটেইলে পড়তে পেরেছি তা না, বাট ইট ইজ এ ভেরি ভেরি সিগনিফিকেন্ট study that has been done. So I again my congratulations to BIGD for doing this survey. এরকম সার্ভে আসলে আমাদের দেশে কখনো এরকম ভাবে এত ডিপলি হয়েছে বলে মানে আমার দেখা নাই at least. So this is I would say this is seminal work, and I'm looking forward to the whole discussion next week. তখন হয়তো আরো গভীরে আমরা যাব। এই প্রেজেন্টেশন দেখে আমার কাছে দু তিনটা জিনিস খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মনে হয়েছে। কিছু পলিসি রেকমেন্ডেশন আমি সরাসরি চলে যাই রাদার দ্যান গোয়িং ইনটু স্পেসিফিক ফাইন্ডিংস। আমার কাছে যে ফোকাস অন প্রবলেম সলভিং স্কিলস, এটা আমার কাছে খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মনে হয়েছে। যে ইটস নট অ্যাবাউট জাস্ট ডিজিটাল স্কিল, বাট ইট ইজ রিয়েলি অ্যাবাউট সলভিং মাই এডুকেশন প্রবলেম, মাই হেলথ প্রবলেম, my financial access problem. The digital gives me a tool to solve my problem. So it's really a problem that I have, focusing on that. And digital is just a means to that end, which is solving that problem. That's a very, very key identification. It's not just digital. I mean, digital niye ki korbo. Mane it's not. অনেক সময় বলা হয় যে ডিজিটাল স্কিল আমরা জাস্ট ইম্পার্ট করি, ট্রেনিং করে ফেলি, তাহলে তো হলো। বিষয়টা আসলে তা না। I mean, if we can actually position this as a significant enabler to solving a real life problem that I have, rural household, middle class household, rich household, doesn't matter. মানে problem that ICT can particularly solve. I mean, that's a very, very important identification. So I really congratulate the researchers for making that identification. From the point of view of digital skills to solving a specific problem, সেখানে যদি আমরা চিন্তা করি তো দুইভাবে চিন্তা করা যেতে পারে। একটা হচ্ছে যে আমাদের হাতে কিছু টুল আছে, সেগুলোকে আমরা বিভিন্ন নামে সেগুলোর আমরা নাম দিয়েছি। কোনোটার নাম হচ্ছে ল্যাপটপ, কোনোটার নাম হচ্ছে ট্যাবলেট, কোনোটার নাম হচ্ছে স্মার্টফোন, আবার কিছু আছে হচ্ছে আমাদের ফিচার ফোন। আমরা এগুলোর নাম দিয়েছি, এবং যারা এগুলোর নাম দিয়েছে বা যারা ডিজাইন করেছে তাদের রিয়ালিটি এবং যারা সার্ভে পার্টিসিপেন্ট যারা ছিলেন তাদের রিয়ালিটি ভিন্ন। So basically what we try to do is to impose our reality on the reality of the households that we have surveyed. So what does that really mean? That means that there is a big divide in what should really happen. মানে আমরা বলছি যে আমাদের রিয়ালিটিটা ওখানে ইম্পোজ করবো। আমাদের স্ট্রাকচারাল রিয়ালিটি তো শুধু যদি একটা ডিভাইসের মধ্যে ইম্পোজ করি আর তাদের পুরো লাইফস্টাইল ইম্পোজ না করি অথবা এনেবল করতে না পারি, দেন দ্যাটস আনফেয়ার। আমরা বলছি যে আমরা মানে একটা হয়তো মিডল ক্লাস অথবা আপার মিডল ক্লাস হাউসহোল্ডে আমরা যেভাবে একটা ল্যাপটপ ব্যবহার করি বা একটা ট্যাবলেট ব্যবহার করি ফর এডুকেশন, ওই একই রিয়ালিটিটা আমাদের ইম্পোজ করতে হবে একটা পুয়ার হাউসহোল্ডে, এবং ওইখানে এরকম কানেক্টিভিটি থাকতে হবে, ওইখানে এরকম স্কিল থাকতে হবে, এবং দ্যাটস হোয়াট মেক্স সেন্স। কিন্তু সেখানে হয়তো ফুড সিকিউরিটি নাই, সেখানে হয়তো জব সিকিউরিটি নাই, ওগুলোর ব্যাপারে আমরা কথা বলছি না। আমরা কিন্তু বলছি যে ডিজিটাল ডিভাইডটি আমাদের পূরণ করতে হবে। সো that's a disconnect, I think. So unless we are able to impart all our other amenities, শুধু এটার কথা কেন বলবো? That basically means যে how we access education, how we access healthcare in a relatively affluent household, and how a poor marginalized household accesses those things are different. That means the digital access will also have to be different. So what does that really mean? And what does that skill, মানে আমরা যদি আসলে ডিজাইন থিঙ্কিং চিন্তা করি, designing a digital access tool through the eyes of the survey participant, আমি শুধু সার্ভে পার্টিসিপেন্টের কথাই যদি চিন্তা করি, তাহলে that access must look very different, and that is what we need to find. এবং I don't think we have found that. এটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট যে আসলে what should access look like. It's not just cost of internet. আমরা cost of internet কমায় ফেললাম, যেভাবে আমরা 10 টাকার অ্যাকাউন্ট করেছিলাম একসময় কৃষকদের জন্য, তাই না? 1 কোটি টাকার 1 কোটি অ্যাকাউন্ট আমরা তৈরি করেছি, বাট এগেন লুকিং থ্রু দ্য আইজ অফ যারা 1000 টাকা বা 10,000 টাকার অ্যাকাউন্ট করে, তাদের আই দিয়ে আমরা 10 টাকার অ্যাকাউন্ট করেছি। সো অবভিয়াসলি 10 টাকার অ্যাকাউন্টগুলো ব্যবহার হয় না। MFS is designed very differently. MFS is designed through the eyes of the the small consumers, the marginalized consumers. So we need an MFS lens to design digital access for the survey participants. ওটা এখনো করতে পারি না, আমার মনে হয় কোনো দেশই আসলে সেটা করতে পারে না, বিকজ টেলকো, আমরা যদি এখানে আমরা যদি কন্ট্রাস্ট করি যে একটা ব্যাংক কিভাবে চিন্তা করে, একটা টেলকো কিভাবে চিন্তা করে, that therein lies the difference. We are thinking like banks and not like telcos. If we think like telcos, then we will get a Bikash. If we think like a bank, then we'll get a BRAC bank. So Bikash thought fundamentally differently, and that idea came from the telco world. So এখন আমাদের একটু অন্যভাবে যদি চিন্তা করি, তাহলে হয়তো আমাদের ডিজিটাল স্কিল কি দরকার সেটা আমরা একটু অন্যভাবে চিন্তা করলে ভালো হয়। আর থার্ড যে পয়েন্ট যেটা আমি বলবো, that's my last point, that is the idea of assisted access, which is where the digital centers in the union porishods and anywhere else, that's where they provide an assisted access. এখন ডাক্তার ভাইয়ের কথা যেটা আসিফ বললেন, এরকম আরো 25টা থেকে 30টা নতুন টেলিমেডিসিন সার্ভিস আগেও কিছু ছিল, কিন্তু they become vibrant, much more vibrant in the last few months because of obvious reasons. I won't go into the reasons. তো তাহলে obviously they are doing something differently. Maybe they are for trying to find that holy grail of looking to the telco lens. Again, telco, I'm just using as an analogy. I'm bolchi na je telco lens is the right lens. I'm just making that comparison between a bank and a telco, and how MFS has made access to money transfer digitally much more successful, much more accessible for the poor, because it looked at it fundamentally differently. Ekhon ei je assisted access is also that when we designed this 10, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, তখনও ওই মানে looking at it differently was really our goal. যে ঠিক আছে, এরকম একটা পয়েন্ট আছে, ডিজিটাল অ্যাক্সেস আমরা দিতে পারছি না ডিরেক্টলি টু হাউস হোল্ডস, তাহলে হাউস হোল্ড থেকে কেউ যদি তার ওয়াকিং ডিস্টেন্সের মধ্যে আসতে পারে, তাহলে দ্যাট ক্রিয়েটস এ মিনিংফুল ডিজিটাল অ্যাক্সেস। এবং ওইখানে যদি আমরা স্কিল তৈরি করতে পারি, দ্যাট ক্রিয়েটস দ্য ব্রিজ বিটুইন দ্য অ্যানালগ অ্যান্ড দ্য ডিজিটাল ওয়ার্ল্ড। And that was really the premise, and that has been moderately successful across the country, and very, very successful in 70% of the locations. It has created meaningful access for 5 to 6 million people every month. It has reduced billions of dollars in terms of access to services for cost. The TCV data boli, the time, cost, and visit. So you know the numbers, so they're quite astronomical numbers there because of the assisted access. এখন assisted accessটা আমার মনে হয় যে যেমন আমরা ই-কমার্স করার চেষ্টা করছি এক শপ দিয়ে, same issue, that a buyer and seller could find amongst these digital center entrepreneurs proxies that will basically buy and sell on behalf of them. So the issue of assisted access, the issue of proxy, basically then transfers the need for specific digital skill to somebody else. এবং আমি তার কাছে যেতে পারি, I will pay a small fee, or maybe it's even subsidized through some means, যেটা আমরা দেখেছি যে social safety net transferred digitally during the last few months, government salaries transferred digitally, we were able to waive some of those fees. So we need to come up with some business models for the assisted access as well that makes sense for all parties concerned. The marginalized who will access the services, the intermediaries that will have to survive as a business entity, and then all the other transport mechanisms in between. তো আমি তিনটা বিষয়ে আমার কাছে মনে হয়েছে যে গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মনে হয়েছে, যে the issue of looking at it as a problem solving skill. Second হচ্ছে looking through the eyes of the recipient, I shouldn't use the word recipient, the survey participants, jara they represent a large body of people in our country, and designing digital access and digital skills through their lens. And third হচ্ছে the issue of assisted access, এবং making a mix of skills between the end user and the intermediate. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Anir Bhai. I think that's actually a very useful framework for us to think about further analysis of this survey, and to also think about the larger research agenda that we are trying to really work on, which I broadly call social science of digitization. And I think there's a whole range of work that we really want to do on this. So I think this is a really, really useful framework just on this whole looking at the lens, the MFS lens that you talk about in terms of looking at digital access. I think it's really interesting because I think without the revolution of microfinance that happened before, I think it would be very difficult to really have that type of a MFS lens. I think the MFS lens is also predicated on a history of understanding the microfinancial world, which I think then, that could be sort of catapulted into and leveraged into a more of a sort of a microfinancial service sort of space. So I think there is some kind of work that needs to be done on that. So perhaps there's a micro digital agenda that we should be really pursuing. Just like microfinance, a micro digital agenda, micro digital access agenda. And I think we can draw a lot from, our own, kind of ways in which the evolution of microfinance itself has happened in terms of understanding the micro realities and the lived realities of poor people's lives. So I think that's
a good way of putting it. I mean, MFS is really micro banking in a sense, right?
Exactly. So I think there is a micro digital research agenda, micro digital access. I think there's something there that we could definitely discuss further. I think we are, 7 minutes, beyond the 2 hour that we had. So I'd like to, at this stage, thank everyone. But just to let you know that this is something, it's just the beginning of a conversation that we wish to have. And more than that, as I said, for BIGD, we really want to develop the whole social science of digitization as a major research strand, cross thematic research strand across all the types of research we do. And we look forward to, engaging with all of you. And we would need, sort of obviously to sort of your advice, your counsel, to be able to, kind of be useful and sort of add some value. So thank you all very much again. And bye-bye.
Thanks again, Imran Bhai, Mehnaz, for inviting me. And I promise to be there at the full time next time. Thank you. Look forward to it.